As we slowly progressed on the wonderful Argentinian bus network up to Salta, we went past, or we were in a place which is quite special because it's home of multicoloured mountains. Now that might sound strange, but trust me, it's true. The fun thing that we saw was the, excuse my pronunciation, called Humahuaca, which is basically the 14-coloured mountain. Kid you not, Google it. 14 colours on a mountain. Complete bonkers, nothing like you'd ever seen before in your life. This is why the world is really, truly a phenomenal place. That was a great bus journey for that reason. It reminded us a little bit of almost like being in Death Valley. Not because it was overly hot or anything, but the fact you'd be on a long, winding road seamlessly in the middle of nowhere. And that was at the best of times. It was quite a cool experience. But those mountains, just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I mentioned last week about Salta, home of empanadas. So yeah, imagine a Cornish pasty, but a very light pastry rather than the thick pastry that you get on the pasties themselves. The challenge that we had with Salta, and this is why we only spent the one night there, was lo and behold to us, when we arrived, we realised that we'd struggled to get accommodation beforehand, and we weren't sure why. It seemed to be quite a well-visited place, a well-liked place, and we were struggling with accommodation. So we ended up spending the one night there because of the relative high cost of the accommodation. But we found out why. There was a women's convention going on in Salta at the time we were there. Now, I'm not against feminism or anything like that at all. At the time we weren't expecting it, but we did joke that no matter what people were saying or doing, no matter what we'd done in our time in Salta, that as men it would probably be our fault for anything that was going on anyway. So we did have a few jokes about that between ourselves when we were there. But the main reason to visit Salta was to have the empanadas. After dropping bags in the hostel, we were given a couple of recommendations for places to have empanadas. So we thought rather than just go to one place, we would go around and sample different empanadas from different places because, well, why not? And also had a cool walk around the city itself. Just as you'd expect, I imagine, the centro area was quite nice. There's a little river, the Rio Arias, which was around the Mercado Municipal, the main market. Again, loads of sights and sounds in there, all types of different, random foods here and there. I think we ended up having a look at a little football stadium that we saw as well. The Estadio de Gimnasia y Divert de Salta. Saw a few castles. Went on the little walking tour basically of Salta itself. That was it. The empanadas in the evening were absolutely divine. I think they're, jamón y queso, ham and cheese. There was carne, different sorts of meats and seafoods, and hands down, the best empanadas I've ever had. Hands down, absolutely scintillating. But we'd also realised that because of our little cock up on Dollar Azul, the second set of Dollar Azul, that we were pretty much out of cash. That Argentina would now go back to being, how it should be in terms of how much things should cost. We also knew that we were near the Bolivian, relatively near the Bolivian border, but we decided that rather than spend an extra day or two in Salta and experience really strong accommodation prices, we would head just up the road, up the Route 9 to San Salvador de Jujuy on the Rio Grande. We'd done that. We stayed in an Irish, I think it was an Irish hostel anyway, with something that I've never seen before and I've never seen since, which is massive triple bunk beds. Massive triple bunk beds. Now, I don't do well on bunk beds anyway, so I always have to take ground floor. Aaron normally takes a higher bunk as well. That's just because of my inability to get up and down ladders. If you remember the Vietnam stories from years gone by as well, that's probably why I'm not trusted with ladders. So I always get the ground bunk where possible. San Salvador, the most intriguing thing about this place was the people. Now, I say this in the best way I can think of politically. In Brazil, we've been used to a multitude of colours. In Paraguay, we were used to a certain colour of the people. I'm just going to say indigenous. I appreciate that might not be the best word. But there you are. Uruguay and Argentina and Chile, we found were predominantly, whiter people, to say the least. And for some reason in our head, I think we got so used to that in Argentina and Chile that when we headed up into San Salvador here, it had gone back to, again, dare I say it, indigenous. You're quite high up in North Argentina here. You're probably on a par with, Asuncion in Paraguay in terms of, is it longitude or latitude? One of the two, might be latitude. So we were quite taken aback by the people. Something we weren't expecting. That's our perceptions at the time. So that was probably the most striking thing about San Salvador. But based on the Rio Grande, the hostel was okay. We just basically went for a walk around, same things we've done in Salta. Luckily there was no feminist convention here, so that was okay, so it felt a bit more relaxed. But we walked up and down the river, walked across a few bridges, visited the market, sat in the local park for a little bit. And we went back to the hostel. We went to the hostel and decided that we'd pretty much seen everything we needed to see here. I think this was a Saturday, we should head off to Bolivia tomorrow. But we also done a count of what we'd spent. And yeah, we'd budgeted here and budgeted there for what different countries should cost. And, if we could save a bit on accommodation here, great. And if we have a cheat day here, then great. And, basically, here's our budget. This is what we spent. Where are we standing? We realised that we'd probably saved between £500 and £1,000 by having done things slightly differently, but mainly because of Dollar Azul. We'd saved a hell of a lot of cash. We'd also saved a bit of time by not visiting some places as well. So that's when we made a decision to head over to the Galapagos Islands. We'd created a budget for it. This was, Aaron's place to see before he died. And we decided that we should head over there. Now, we knew that we had to end up in a place called Guayaquil in Ecuador in order to get the flights, or the easiest flights over to the Galapagos. We knew that there was a tourist tax or tourist entrance fee of about $100. And I think we ended up nabbing flights for about a couple of £100 return, £100 per person, I think, which was extraordinary. Or it might have been, £100 each way per person, so still great value for cash there. And so it was in San Salvador, in the north of Argentina, that we decided to book to go to the Galapagos. We'd go just before Christmas. We'd fly back on the 22nd, I think, of December. And then the following day, the 23rd of December, we'd fly out from Guayaquil again to Panama City. Happy days. That was the fondest thing about San Salvador itself. And from there, we had a bit more of a bounce in our step. Now knowing that we're off to the Galapagos as well, how many people could say they've been there? Think of the great things we're going to see. We knew that we were just about to enter into, not dangerous territory, but very high altitude. Bolivia is an incredibly high country. In fact, surprise, surprise, when you're near a mountain range, chances are you're going to be quite high up anyway. But certainly around this area, they are well renowned for being ridiculously high. Now, luckily, we'd had a bit of experience in Santiago, being about 3,000 meters high. But we knew that we were in for, at some points, 5,000 plus. And we also knew there was a rule where it was, when you're in the high altitude, take a couple of days to acclimatise and do not drink. Fine, not a problem at all. This is not 2011 after all. So the following day, it was a Sunday, we booked to get on a bus from San Salvador up to a place called La Quiaca, with the aim of making it all the way to quite possibly a place called Tupiza in the south of Bolivia. Possibly to Uyuni, which was home of the salt flats. This is where we were aiming to get to. So we're on the bus. Apologies on the last episode. I said that we'd gone through Humahuaca, the 14-coloured mountain, before we got to Salta. That's my notes, completely incorrect. It was the Parque Nacional Los Cardones. That's where we had gone through to get to Salta. The 14-coloured mountain Humahuaca was between San Salvador and the little tiny border town of La Quiaca. We got into La Quiaca about lunchtime. It's a Sunday, not a lot going on. We headed towards the border, between La Quiaca and Matanzas, which is just across the river in Bolivia, but it was closed. Now we're a bit pissed off by this. Now what's going on here? What's happening? All we're trying to do is get into Bolivia. Now it turns out in Bolivia it was election day, and on election day all borders close until I think it was 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And of course we didn't know this at the time, and we're there, we're in La Quiaca, we're at the border town, we're relatively high up now, and we're there with a closed border. Not a lot we can do. They're not letting anyone across. Of course people are, going down the little valley to get, to ignore that. Bear in mind, La Quiaca is about 3,500 meters above sea level. So we're there. There's not a lot to do. A couple of other British people that have been on the same bus as well. This lovely older couple were there as well. We all decided there's not a lot we can do here. Border opens at 6 o'clock. It's a tiny little place. Naffle's happening. So we thought we might as well just start waiting in line for the border. It's getting to about lunchtime. Everyone's a bit peckish. Again, food provisions are not there because we hadn't expected this to happen. And we're talking to this couple. We're making conversation. Where are you going? Where have you been? What's up? And myself and the husband said, we're pretty hungry now. Well, we're going to go and find some food. And now his wife was saying, basically, look, what are the odds of, you're not going to find food in this town. What are the odds of doing that? I think Aaron intervened and said, Nancy was a name that springs to mind. He said, Nancy, trust me, I've travelled with Rob long enough. If the man needs to find food, he will come back with food. He said, any dietary requirements? He said, no, everything's fine. So I walked off with the husband whose name still evades me, and we found these big, massive bocadillos. If you remember, we spoke about bocadillos in Buenos Aires at the ecological park. I mean, these were pretty much the same. They were ginormous, the size of your head. You could build a house out of them. They were that big. So we came back with bocadillos. Big bocadillos, much to everyone's amazement. And fiddling around in the bag, and that's when we realised that we'd picked up a couple of bottles of wine from the first bodega in Mendoza. So we said, well, look, we've got nothing else to do. Oddly, Nancy had some plastic cups with her, which was great. So we opened a bottle of wine. She had a corkscrew as well. Opened up a bottle of wine, and we sat there and at the border, just chatting, drank some wine, had, happy days, basically. Now, a few hours later, we're close to borders being opened. We decided that it was getting dark, and what we do, that we would go across into, sorry, my apologies again, it wasn't Matanzas, it was Villazon, the Bolivian town just the other side of the border. It was election day. We weren't really sure what was going to happen in the evening. You see all these stories about contested elections and violence and bits and bobs. So we decided we would get into Villazon. We'd walk up the hill. We'd find a hostel or hotel for the night, and then we would create a plan for the following day. A border crossing open. There was we were at the front of the queue, but it was almost like a Royal Rumble, getting across the passport control. No one was giving a shit. It was just crazy stuff. Everything got stamped. We paid the visa entrance. Or no, thinking about it, it's Bolivia, so I think it was visa free. We got the stamp in there. Boom, happy days. We're into Villazon. The sun's gone down, and you're faced with this massive steep hill. Bear in mind, we've just broken rule number 1 of high altitude, which is no drinking. So we're all feeling a bit lightheaded. And again, walking up this hill, you're at 3,500 meters. Crazy stuff. All felt a bit lightheaded at the end of walking up the hill. We thought about getting on a Colectivo, but we decided, let's be sensible here. Found a hotel that evening to stay in, and then reconvened in the morning, basically, over breakfast, to then make a plan of action. And the reason for that is that in our time at being at the border crossing, we'd sort of developed a decent friendship, as you do when you're travelling. Kind of said, look, these guys would be cool to travel with. Let's be open to their suggestions. They like to do things off the beaten track. Let's see what happens in the morning. And that is exactly what we done. We started our day in Villazon. Where would we end up? We did not know. What would we do? We did not know. But you'll have to find out next week. So join us for next week when we attempt to crack on with discovering Bolivia and getting over a nasty hangover thanks to wine at altitude. Hasta luego.